If it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense. Hi, this is Tom Schwab with Interview Valet, and today we're going to talk about a return on investment from podcast interviews. A lot of people will talk about it. We're going to dissect it because one of the things that we strive for is to get you the maximum return on investment of your time and your money invested. Now, first of all, I'm going to tell you what we say is going to turn on the head of what you're hearing from people like Facebook and Google, because they're going to tell you that everything today can be measured and it can be attributed, but it's just not so. And let me give you an example. Let's say that I hear you on a podcast. I hear you. I remember the name of the company. I'm not sure if I spell it right, but I go to the search engine and I put it in there. And what do you know? The first thing that pops up is an ad for your company. So I click on that. I go to your website. I look around. Google's going to tell you that 100% of that is attributed to them. Now, let's say that I didn't buy that. I got distracted. I really wanted to, but you had a Facebook retargeting pixel. And because of that, I started to see ads pop up for you. And I clicked on one of those ads and I came back and I went to your website and I actually purchased. Facebook is going to tell you that they are 100% responsible for that. Now, I don't know what it is. Is it a third? I don't know, but I know that somebody there is not getting credit for it. And it's the person that's trying not to sell you the paid advertising. Now, you see, there's a lot of art in return on investment in that calculation. It's not just a number that you can see out to the decimal place. Some of it is qualitative. Other parts is quantitative, things that you can measure. So first, let's jump into the qualitative. Qualitative is when coaches tell us, that was a great interview. When an author tells us, I know that is going to sell a lot of books. Or when a software as a service company goes, man, this is going to cause the phone to ring off the hook. But you see, it's really what they feel. And you could think about this if you were speaking from a stage. You look out there and you're like, yeah, these are the right people. You see them nodding their heads and it's like, this is connecting. Now, digital's a little bit different. You're not going to see that on a podcast interview, but you're going to get those feelings back from the host. And we hear people say, that was a great interview. The host asked great questions. The host was interested. I'm sure that this is going to be great. Everything just keyed there. That was one of the best presentations I've ever given. That's that qualitative. Other people will say, man, after a few more interviews like that, I'm going to be able to raise my prices because that's helping me as an authority. There's all those little things. If you say that, man, I made a great relationship with that host, I think we're going to have some kind of partnership come out of that. Well, it's hard to really measure at the very beginning, but you've got that qualitative feel. Now, for a lot of people, that's where they stop and they'll say podcast interview marketing works great. But if you move it on a little bit, there's a lot of quantitative things that you can measure. There's things like, well, how much is a backlink worth to you? There are certain people that'll pay $100 for a quality backlink. Well, you know that every time you're on a great podcast, they should have show notes and they should be linking back to you. So figure out what's the value of that backlink. As you build your list, what do you value an email as you build the list there? So you could say, okay, the list went up so much after this podcast. That's what the value was from it. Maybe it's social media followers. Maybe that's what you're focusing on and saying our value of each social media follower is this. So you can look at the bump that you get when that podcast starts to promote you, cross promote you. You get out there to a different audience. Exposure brings opportunity. Only you can tell me what a backlink's worth to you, what somebody on your list is worth to you, what social media followers are worth to you. There are some numbers, and I love working with software service companies because they know their numbers down to the penny. A lot of times they'll measure what is the cost of lead acquisition, meaning how much do we have to spend in order to get somebody back to our site and sign up for being a lead. So they know their cost of lead acquisition, and they can measure that from podcast interviews. I also know their cost of customer acquisition. And one of the things that we hear from all of our clients is that the leads are hotter. That means they close faster and they close at a higher percentage. We did a study a long time ago where we said that podcast interviews convert 25 times better than blogs. That study is often cited and often cited wrong. But if you think about it, what it's saying is if someone comes to your website from a podcast as opposed to a blog, they're 25 times more likely to become a lead. And we've done that study over and over, and it always holds out there. So there's other things that you can look at. You can say, well, with a new client that comes, what's their lifetime value? Are they less likely to be price conscious? Are they buying bigger ticket items maybe than just that little tripwire product that you have there? Now, a lot of people will say, well, where do you get all that information? And there's a couple ways you can do it. Some of it is high tech. Some of it's low tech. One of the great things you can do is you can look at Google Analytics and see where traffic is coming from. You can also use the best practice of welcome pages. And this is something that we teach. When I'm on a podcast interview, I will send them back to a dedicated page where I talk about my 3 offers, my small yes, my medium yes, and my heck yes. It's a dedicated page. So I know that anybody that hits that page came from that podcast. An example would be if I'm on Jamie Masters' podcast, Eventual Millionaire. I may say, all of that stuff is back at interviewvalet.com/EM. And anybody that goes there, I know originally came from Jamie's podcast there. So it's a way that you can tag it and you can really start to go with those numbers. Even if you don't have a complicated system that can track all of that, you can ask your clients. Just ask them, hey, where did you find out about us? Now, they may not say the first time they got found out about you or the last time, but they're likely to tell you the most important one. And that's something that we always teach is just ask people. Often they'll say a podcast. And we'll say, well, which one? And they don't know. And chances are they probably heard you on more than one. You see, return on investment is important. It's something that you should always be looking at. Because the way we do return on investment is when we see something works, we double down on it. And that's what we see from clients. We've got software as service companies that came to us and said, I want to start with 2 interviews a month. One ended up at 16 interviews a month. Now, granted, it was 4 different talents, people speaking there, but they just realized it was working so well, they wanted to double down on it. Still, it's a little bit qualitative. It's a little bit quantitative. And there's not a magic formula that I can tell you exactly this is what your return on investment is going to be. One of the best questions that I ever heard about ROI came from the CEO of a company. It was a software as a service company. We'd been talking with the CMO for a while, and their monthly recurring revenue on their product was right around $400. It aligns pretty much with what we were charging for each podcast interview. And so he got up there and he listened to it and he's like, hold it. Now explain this to me. So you're going to get me in front of thousands, tens of thousands of ideal customers, and I get to talk to them. And if one of them signs up, it'll pay for itself in the first month. And the CMO said, yes. And the CEO said, what other avenue do we have where we can get backlinks? We can get this other content from, and that it could pay for itself in just one customer and in 1 month. And the CMO agreed that he said, that's for our customer lead acquisition, customer acquisition. That's amazing. And I love what the CEO said. He said, if you get me in front of 1,000 ideal customers and I can't sell 1, he says, if I can't sell 10, if I can't sell 50 of these products, he says, you don't need to fire Interview Valet. You need to fire me, because either I suck as a presenter or our product sucks. So do the calculation yourself. What are all these things worth to you? And what do you think your return on investment would be if you could get in front of thousands of your ideal customers and have their undivided attention for 30 to 45 minutes, not just today, but for evergreen?